Possibilities, a podcast for those who are ready to evolve into unstoppable, intuitive, and resilient entrepreneurial leaders. Every episode features successful business thought leaders who share their wisdom about insightful topics that help you amplify how you do business and serve yourself and others. Get comfortable and have fun as you listen to your host, Terry Wildemann, have lively conversation with her guest. Here's Terry. Welcome, everyone, to Awaken the Possibilities. This is Terry Wildemann bringing you dynamic, interactive conversation. Today, I have a phenomenal person who shares my love of heart-centered leadership. You know, when I saw some of the things that he was writing, I thought, I have to have this gentleman on my show because he truly follows my perspective, my ideals, and my values when it comes to empowering leaders and helping them be the best that they can be, which in turn helps you be the best that you can be. So I'd like to introduce you to Mark Crowley, who is the author of Lead from the Heart, Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century. His book has been taught in 9 American universities, and his leadership podcast has an audience of 140 countries. He is a pioneer in advocating for bringing the heart into balance with the mind in workplace leadership. Welcome to the show, Mark. It is so exciting to have you here.
Thank you so very much, Terry. My pleasure.
So, Mark, I'm curious, how did you get involved with heart-centered leadership?
Oh, that's such an easy question to answer. It's an evolution of my entire life existence. Truly. And so the nomenclature of heart-based leadership or lead from the heart is truly something that never came out of my mouth for, most of my career. It wasn't until I looked back on what I was doing and fully understood why I was doing it and what the impacts were that I realized I'm affecting the hearts in people. And from there, I went looking for the science to validate it. But working backwards here, I'll tell you how I got here, but I will tell you that in the process of writing the book, I had these piles. And the piles were the chapters, and the chapters were what ultimately became the second half of the book. I never had any intention of writing the first half of the book. So I'm having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he said, you're going to have to explain why all this works, right? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, people are going to think they needed to have a shitty childhood in order to lead this way. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the upbringing, but when he said it to me, it was oh my God, like I'd given no thought to this, and B, like he's right. I can't just take it. People aren't going to take me seriously if I just go here, take my word. You're going to have to write some explanation for this. So sitting exactly where I am, I started pondering this, like, what was the impact of this? Like, why was what I was doing as a leader impacting people so profoundly, where they just beat a path to work for me and did extraordinary things. And it didn't really matter what job family people had. It wasn't male or female. It wasn't young or old or educated or not educated. It was everyone responded the same way. So it was human, deeply human. And it was consistent through the course of my career. So it didn't matter what level they were in, so as I progressed in my career, I'm managing people at all different levels and all different responsibilities, and everyone responded the same. So I realized, okay, what is it? What did I do? What was I doing in terms of affecting people?
Nice.
And it boiled down to this epiphany that I was affecting the hearts in people, which should sound really great, right? Except I went in and told my wife at the end of the day, I said, I've wasted a year of my life, because now that I understand what I've done, no one's going to take me serious. In the world that I just came from, financial services, where I was hugely successful, no one ever looked under the hood and said, what's Mark Crowley doing to get these great performances? They just took it and great. He's a good leader. He's a good manager. That's where they left it. So you come out with a book called Lead from the Heart, and all of a sudden people are going to go, like, is he a religious guy now? Like, did he have a spiritual meltdown or transformation? I'm not kidding. A lot of cynicism around this, right?
You're preaching to the choir, Mark.
So,
I had a
yeah.
business called Heart-Centered Success.
So
Trust me, I get it.
I told my wife, I said, I wasted
I
a year.
got it.
There's no way I'm going to write a book called Lead from the Heart or anything
Yeah.
close to that. And she goes, well, didn't you already prove it worked? Like, don't you
Yeah.
already know it's true? And
Smart lady.
And that's when I realized, okay, I got to go figure this thing out. So long and short of it is that my mom died when I was very young. My father was a very highly successful person, one of the top people in General Electric, created General Electric Credit Corporation. He was a serious alcoholic and a psychologically and emotionally abusive person who beat down my spirit to a point where just getting up in the morning was the best that I could do. And then right after high school, thinking that, I'm going to try to go off to college and just figure it out, he kicked me out of the house with no warning, no financial support, no emotional support, no, please, you're still your dad, come home on Sundays and I'm still here for you. It was over in an instant. And
wow.
So from that point forward, he told me repeatedly that I would never amount to anything, that, that I fundamentally lacked. That was his language. And by telling me that I would never amount to anything, I basically equivocated that to the extent that I could succeed in college. If I did, I wouldn't be the failure he predicted. And if I didn't graduate, then I would. That's how my mind worked at the time. So I was really determined for my own salvation, my own survival, to get through college.
Mm-hmm.
And so
how did you get yourself through college?
I just wrote a professor of mine, 30 years ago. He's now retired emeritus professor, and said, I literally didn't show up for class for like 2.5 weeks because it was an 8 o'clock in the morning and I was just like completely exhausted. And the professor's like, somebody find that guy and get him back into class. He's a good guy, like years old. And he didn't know my story, but I literally had to thank him. And he goes, I had no idea that was going on in your life. It was sheer determination, to be honest with you. And I got into a rhythm. Ultimately, I got into a rhythm where it was you get up in the morning, you go to school, then you go to work all day, and then you go back to school and you study until midnight, and then you do it again. And it's 7 days a week, and you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Mm-hmm. And there were moments where I was terrified. Obviously, car breaks down, that's game over for me because I had no extra resources, nowhere to go, no extra money. But somehow it just, over time, I figured it out. Took me 5.5 years to graduate. I remember going in and getting my counselor, and the counselor goes, where do you think you are? And I said, well, I think I'm heading into my senior year. And she goes, you would be if you hadn't taken a lot of the wrong classes. So,
oh my goodness.
So it was just, I had nobody there to direct me and guide me, and so I had to figure it out. But this was a path that I was supposed to take. I think that's really the conclusion. I had to have my mom die when I was very young. I had to have the abusive father in order to truly embody the message that I'm, really trying to convey to people.
Well, I like to say that you're not trying, you are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. So, Mark, one of the things I know about you is that you have a phenomenal story about going to Hawaii, which just cracked me up. And it contributed a little bit to you moving in the direction of where you are now. Can you share that story with us?
So the background is that I spent my largest part of my career in financial services. So banking, stockbrokers, all that kind of stuff, right? So this is a very aggressive sales culture, dog eat dog kind of a world. And I thrived in that, not because I sort of competed at that level, but because I was able to lead people in a way that got people to perform without having to kill them, without having to manipulate them or manage them with fear and intimidation. So I'm getting great results. And so the chairman of our company, this was 50,000 employees, said, I want to identify who the next senior leaders are going to be. And so he had a group of people handpick, about 24 people that were asked to go to Hawaii for a week. And he was going to be there. He was going to give his special attention. So we stayed at the Four Seasons. It was done, extremely well. And the first night that we were there happened to be Mardi Gras. So it was a, Wednesday in March. And so they had this huge party with, fire eaters and people on stilts and jugglers. And so everybody's walking around with drinks and they've got music playing. And so they've got a tarot card reader and everybody's lined up for the tarot card reader. So I sit down with the tarot card reader. She asked me to take a few cards. And so I give it to her and she asked me what I do for a living. And I said, well, everybody here is a banker, so you don't need to ask anybody else this question. And she goes, well, you're not supposed to be a banker. That's not who you are. And I thought, well, that's interesting. There's sort of like this knowingness, even though I'd spent 20 plus years of my career in banking, there was something that sort of resonated. So then we kept moving around and going to different stations, and the chairman ended up talking. And about an hour and a half later, now I'm sitting down at the palm reader table, and the palm reader asked me the same question and then gives me the same answer. She goes, that's not who you were put on this planet to be. You're not a banker. And I don't imagine you're going to be a banker much longer. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm here so that I can get promoted. This is where my future is. But then I looked at her and I go, well, are you talking to the tarot card reader? Because she said the same thing. Like, I was totally suspicious that they were in cahoots, and for what reason, who knows? But, it all seemed very, not above board. And I told my wife, I said, this is unusual. And she goes, don't you think that there's some truth in that? Like, aren't you aware at this point that you're not from that world? And so it just sort of, I think, as I look back on that, it was sort of the first introduction that the universe gave me that said, hey, this is just a stepping stone for where you're headed.
Well, I'm curious, was it really the first introduction or the one that finally got your attention?
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
Because the reason I'm saying that is, I have my angels behind me. You see them very clearly over here, and with the angel cards underneath, and I've got my left brain, very left-brained.
The teacher appears when the student's ready. I think if it's true that I needed to go through a certain sequence, I had to live that sequence. So
of course,
if I had too many tarot card readers telling me that along the way, I may have been derailed from what I was supposed to learn, So,
and that is, that's a very brilliant comment, because I think a lot of us forget that where we are now is an inward journey that starts at birth. And as leaders, it's important for us to recognize that we are given all the tools that we need when it's time for us to be completely visible. And it was time for you to become completely visible, and you got hit over the head by those two folks. And I love the story of how you put your book together. So I know that part of your book, in putting it together, you connected with an organization that I'm certified with and I've been working with since 2001. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so you'll find this whole process rather interesting, Terry, because again, it happened in a way that is all synchronistic. That's all.
Of course it is.
So while I was at my organization, I was a senior vice president, and I had $1 million life insurance that the company paid for. So if anything happened to me, my family would be protected, right? So when I left, I needed to replace that life insurance policy. My brother-in-law happens to own an insurance agency. So he said, I'll do it for you. I'll take care of it. I'm going to have somebody come out to the house. So the nurse came out and did all the tests that they do. And I've, run marathons. I'm a very healthy guy. And so about a week later, my brother-in-law calls me up and he says, I'm not bullshitting you. You've got to get to the hospital. The insurance company just called and said, not only are they not going to insure you, but you have a serious heart problem. And I thought, well, there's just no there's no indication of that. So I didn't really take it seriously, but of course you're worried, right? So I
Of course.
scheduled an appointment, and I don't have, my doctor has retired. So I've got a brand new doctor. So I'm explaining to him what's going on. And he goes, well, I got an EKG in the office. Let's just run it. So he runs it and he goes, I got good news for you. You're in such good shape for your age that they misinterpreted the data. I'll write them a letter. You'll get your insurance. So I said, okay, great.
Nice.
So I'm
Nice.
done. He goes, but I'm your new doctor, and I need to know about you. So what do you do for a living? And I said, wait a minute. I've been trying to find like a heart surgeon or a cardiologist to speak to about this book that I'm writing. And this is what I'm trying to do with the book. And he goes, huh? He goes, there's a woman here at our hospital, and she's just written a book, and it relates to some of this. So he says, I'll introduce you to her. So her name is Dr. Mimi Ganeri, and she's a world-class cardiologist, graduated top of her class at NYU Medical School, that kind of a person. And so I wrote her a letter and said, this is my story. And interestingly, she got into becoming a heart surgeon because both her mother and father had massive heart attacks in their 40s and died. So
Wow.
she wanted to heal the world and became this great cardio surgeon.
Mhm.
So I wrote to her and said, this is my thesis. Is
Great.
there any science that could validate this? So they called me and said, she wants to talk to you. So this is in my own hometown. This is La Jolla, California, Scripps Clinic. I go meet her. And she's the head of the Center for Integrative Health. She's a disciple of Andrew Weil. She's the real deal. I walk in, messy office. She doesn't get out of her chair. She just looks at me and she goes, Mr. Crowley, you figured out something we're just figuring out ourselves in medicine. I had tears coming down my eyes here. I didn't know what she was going to tell me. All I knew was she was going to validate everything that I had been my whole life. So she said, we believed that the heart was just a pump for 300 years. And we're really discovering that that's simply not true. So what she said was, I want to introduce you to an organization that can help you because I believe in what you're talking about. I think you are on the cutting edge of where leadership needs to go. And so she introduced me to the Institute of Heart Math. And at that point, they had been studying the intelligence of the heart for about 20 years.
Yes,
and one of their co-founders, she introduced me to, and he goes, let's just you and I talk. So we set up several different conversations just like this, and I asked him questions, and I asked him about the heart and what they had understood. And so the core of the book, no pun intended, is this 4th chapter, which is all about the intelligence of the heart. Yeah. So I'm not talking about a metaphorical heart. A lot of people think that when people talk about the heart now in business, by the way, when the book came out, people thought it was completely stupid. Like
what year did your book come out?
2011. So it's been 9 years.
Okay.
And when it came out, I mean, people literally were like, that's dead on arrival with an idea like that, right?
Yes, it is.
But the science is the science. And this is what people don't understand because people are using this word heart now all of a sudden, and they really mean it metaphorically. And I'm saying, no, that feelings and emotions drive human behavior, and that the heart and the mind are connected, and that what goes on in the heart, what the heart experiences, is playing a profound role in shaping our behaviors, our choices, our decisions, so that if you are giving people this experience of positive emotions by caring about them, by nurturing them, by coaching them and teaching them and helping them to identify a purpose and meaning in what they're doing, recognizing them, appreciating them, making them feel safe, all of those kinds of things is this steady, steady, steady drip of what human beings need in order to thrive. So we put people under fear. We keep people under our thumb. We want people to be a little bit afraid in work. And all that is negative emotions that's affecting the heart. And people, what they do is they retreat. Or they want revenge. They're not going to be committed to work. They're not going to be inspired. So everything that we've been doing for, a couple hundred years in terms of how we manage people is the antithesis to what leads to human thriving.
Absolutely.
That's the message that I'm trying to convey to people, is that
Well,
you have
you
to
are. You're
know
not trying.
that.
You are.
Well, what I mean trying is that, there's just some people that aren't going to listen to the conversation
No,
because
they won't.
it's dead on arrival for them.
And I started teaching these concepts in the heart math solution you and I were sharing. I was in the hospital, got out of the hospital after thinking I was having a heart attack, and I had to go to the bookstore when I got out of the ER, and the heart math solution landed in my lap, and I got certified with heart math in 2001 as a heart math coach. So I'm way ahead of you where heart math is concerned, and sharing these concepts with people. They looked at me like I had 3 heads on my shoulders. They could not understand the concept, even based in science. They refused to believe that the heart was actually sending more messages to the brain than the brain was to the heart. And as I shared with folks, I said the heart is the very first organ in the body that appears in the body, and it's from the heart that all the other organs begin to manifest and begin to grow. And the heart energy can be measured 6 to 10 feet, if not further, from the body in a 360-degree circumference. And the brain, it's only 2 inches. So what does that tell you about the power of the heart? So when we connect the knowledge and the insight that's up here with the knowledge and the insight that's in our heart, a heart that is the most powerful pump in the world.
People don't want to. Many people just simply don't want to believe it.
No, they do not.
It sounds too woo-woo. It sounds, and unfortunately, the word heart has a lot of different meanings for people. So the definition that you might have in your mind of heart might be very different from mine, from somebody else's. But invariably, outside of people who are, invested in this, who've studied it,
Mm-hmm.
when you
Yes.
mention heart, it becomes Valentine's, it becomes that mushy kind of thing that's not really what I'm talking about. And I think
Right.
we go back now in terms of talking about my journey. My value is I'm a man who used to manage thousands of stockbrokers, who in a dog eat dog, you don't make any money unless you sell something kind of an environment. I proved that this actually gets greater performance. So nobody can come to me and say, well, heart, that sounds soft and, weak and sentimental. I'm like, okay, it might, but here's why it doesn't. And here's my own experience, so that I can talk to a CEO and they can't go, well, that sounds, really weak. Like, okay, that may be what you think instinctively, but that's just not my own experience. So unfortunately, if a woman saying heart, it gets them in trouble because they already are seen to be more soft than men, right? And then a man says it, and then it's like, what's wrong with that guy? Like,
Yeah. I'll tell you what made the difference where heart math is concerned. What made the difference with heart math was using the M-Wave, the software that they have, and people could actually see how their heart rate variability changed by doing the simple heart math techniques the simple techniques that heart math teaches. So when you put that in front of people, especially when you're giving a webinar or a training, and you have someone sitting up front and you have them put their finger on the I forget what the thing is called, on the thumb piece, and people see how just using these very simple techniques reduces the heart rate variability, and it turns into a nice smooth piece. And you tell them, I said, do you want heart disease or not? That kind of proof, you cannot fight against that because they visually are seeing it.
I'm really not in that world. Like, that's not, so I totally understand the technology that they're
using. I know you do.
But that's not where I go. So
okay.
The minute I start to veer into, heart disease,
the science,
then, well, science is critically important. It's just, it's a dimension of heart math work that I'm just not getting into. What I'm really trying to say to people is just, if you want people to perform for you, isn't it better that you base your practices on what people respond best to?
Yes.
or to what you think they're going to respond best to, because we think that we need to squeeze people in order to get the best productivity, right? We need to, somebody was telling me, I interact with students, there's several universities that are using my book, and a couple of them I actually have a lot of integration with the students, and I read some of their work and talk to them. And one of the students was telling me that when they were sent home for COVID, that the company said, because you don't have a commute now, we expect you to work one more hour extra a day. And I'm just like, wow, so you're entitled to take more from people. This is a mindset that is so flawed.
It
Right?
is. It really, it's, to me, it's, there's one word when it comes to intuitive leadership, heart-centered leadership, as there's one big word, and that's kindness. And kindness, when you treat people kindly, so they respond kindly. When you treat, that heart piece that you're talking about, it has been missing for years and years and years. But folks don't get that treating people with kindness is a strength. It is not a weakness. You're and a lot of these very left brain folks that are pessimistic and skeptical, they tend to look at things from what is strong, that's not strong, that's weak. What they don't realize that what they perceive to be weak is one of the strongest things on the planet. And when you talk about heart, that heart is, and you find metaphors, you're absolutely right, you find metaphors everywhere. But heart-centered success, nothing is going to move heart-centered success the way being pessimistic and judgmental and treating people poorly will. Heart-centered success will elevate people. Treating people poorly just diminishes people. You are so absolutely right with where you're going.
Hard for some, if your mindset, our traditional theory of leadership is that people don't want to work. In fact, it's very interesting. When I was in banking, we hired he's a medical doctor. He and another psychologist created this training called Cohen-Brown. And Cohen-Brown, the foundational idea of Cohen-Brown training, every financial institution in America, this guy got filthy rich off of selling training that was predicated on one idea, which is, I can make you work harder than you will ever work on your own. And so the whole process was micromanagement. It was making commitments. So, Terry, I'm going to get 5 loan applications for you this week. Wednesday, Terry, I've gotten 2 so far. I'm still on track to get the 5. And then on Friday, Terry, I only got 2. So now Terry goes, well, Mark, why didn't you tell everybody why you didn't get 5? Because you promised everybody you were going to get 5. So, so it's this fear and intimidation and make people feel bad and it's week to week. So it doesn't take in the whole world's perspective. Some days are better than others and it all adds up and there's just no humanity to it. But this was a doctor saying, this is how you get there. And the reason why banks bought this is because the leadership of these organizations believed that if you're kind to people, they're gonna get soft around the middle and they're gonna take advantage of you. They're not.
That's not how it works, is it?
So, but unfortunately, these guys come in, they teach you how to do this. Everybody's gung-ho because the company wants it, and the senior managers that are implementing this are, under the microscope. So they're managing with fear and intimidation. And guess what? Performance skyrockets. I'm not kidding. Performance goes off the roof because everybody is being managed with a gun to their head. So when you first respond to that, you're going to do everything you can possibly do. What they don't realize, by the time these guys have cashed their check and moved on, 6 months later, people are sick, they're angry, they're resentful, they're beaten down because this is not a sustainable way of managing people.
It's not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. Managing by fear does not work. Leading by fear, that's not leadership. That's managing by fear.
Correct.
And fear is forgetting everything is all right. People say, oh, the other acronym is for fear is
false evidence appearing real.
Yeah, false evidence appearing real, which you can tell. I can never remember that one.
Yeah,
But forgetting everything is all right is a lot easier.
what happens is that, so I was speaking to one of the largest world, very, very famous insurance company that you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the senior management team, it's just 100 people, CEO, the president, and the head of sales. So I'm done, we're doing Q&A. And the head of sales stands up and he goes, "This is pretty amazing stuff, what you just shared." And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh my God, like I've convinced them, this is fantastic. And then of course I didn't win anything. He said, "But I want to tell you something. If we're in the middle of our quarter and we're not hitting our numbers, I'm going to fear. Because I know if I go to fear, if I start threatening people with their jobs, with their bonuses, with their value in this organization, that
Doesn't
I'm going to
work
hit
that
my
way.
numbers." And I hit it every time when I do this. What do you say to that? And I said, "Well, did you hear anything what I said? I mean, did you listen to any of this? Because you don't realize the profound harm you're doing to people. You can't sustain this. So
No, you
you're
can't.
going to turn over that team and bring in another team, but ultimately you're going to stop attracting people because you
Yeah.
build this reputation of being this ruthless, cutthroat kind of an organization." I don't know that I persuaded them, but I think this
Yeah.
is where the world is right now, gratefully.
Yeah.
I think people are beginning to say, they've had all this time away from their being, supervised. And they're like, do I want to go back to
Yeah.
this? Do I want to go?
And that specific leader, if I were in his or her shoes, I would be saying, okay, instead of going to fear, what if we bring the team together and we discuss what can we do better?
That's
How
not in
can
his, that's not in his toolkit. He doesn't
I
have,
know it's not. I
have
know
that
it's
tool,
not.
you know, but it starts
But
ironically.
did you ask that question to him? I'm curious.
Yeah,
Did you ask him?
it starts here. It starts with, I
Mm,
can get you to do better than you can get yourself to, because I'm going to work you harder. I'm going to keep you under my thumb. And by doing that, you're going to produce more. And then he gets the evidence, just like Cohen Brown did. As soon as they come in, the first quarter's results are incredible. And everybody's gone, yeah, we need to manage people like this. Look how much more productive it is.
and what happens at mid-year?
Yeah, I mean, it starts to go down because you just
Mm-hmm.
simply can't.
It's not sustainable.
It's not.
Absolutely not sustainable. And if you want to create a sustainable business, it's about working with people with what I call thrill leadership, which is trust, honor, respect, integrity, loyalty, and love a fellow man. And when you treat people with those items and with those values, they will always step to the plate and treat and
Correct.
they will elevate
As long as
themselves.
it's authentic. You can't fake this. It has to be in
You
your heart, no
cannot.
pun intended. So
Absolutely.
a lot of people you could say this to and they go, yeah, I'm on board with it. But it's all about how people feel. It's all about how you make people feel. And if you go through the motions and go, I'm all about, caring about you and supporting you. And then the next day, the decision that they make pulls the rug out from under you. Then all you need is to destroy trust one time. And
That's
people
right.
no longer, so you need a different person in leadership than what we put in there. The guy, I'm sad to say, but the guy who's running sales for that insurance company shouldn't be managing people.
No, he should not be. You are absolutely right.
He just
You are
shouldn't be.
absolutely right.
But he rose to the top. Why? Because he gets results. So the
But
company,
his results are incremental. They're not
nobody
consistent.
cares. As long as he's
Oh,
hitting
that's a
the
shame.
numbers, right? As long as he hits the numbers, he's their guy. And I'm
Wow.
saying, well, okay, but you're not looking at it from the point of view of what's your turnover and what are your healthcare and mental health care
And if
costs.
you start to add all that up, if you start to add up what it costs to replace a midterm manager, okay, what it costs to when they're sick away from work, and you have to bring in other people, the costs involved from that kind of leadership, I'd be curious to compare that to the profits, because I'm sure the profits are diminished once they start really looking at the costs of what that kind of leadership does to a company.
If you pose that to these kinds of people, that with that kind of a mindset, they go, well, that's That's in the future. Like, I don't need to worry about the future, right?
Yeah.
All I need to worry about is whether I hit my number right now. Nobody's holding me accountable for the mental illness costs, skyrocketing in this country. This
Hmm.
is a really fascinating thing that's happening, is that
It
mental
is.
cost, the cost to treat mental health problems, anxiety and depression,
Hmm.
is, you've got your normal healthcare costs, and then you've got your mental health care costs. I don't know if this replicates very well, but the point is that the access it's getting to a point where companies are spending more money to treat people for depression and anxiety than it is for any of
Wow.
the physical health care costs. So at some point, you're going to have to do what you just said, which is you're going to have to assess the end outcome here, the long-term effects. Because if you're managing
Exactly.
people like this without caring people, it takes a toll on people, and ultimately you're going to end up paying for that.
Well, all I know is that you have a mission and I have a mission, and that is to ensure that heart-based leadership gets into our entrepreneurial leaders and these companies, because it is a big deal. And I want to thank you so much for being here. And before we close up, I'd like to ask you, what is the biggest piece of advice, the most important piece of advice that you can give the Awaken the Possibilities listeners?
Love your people.
Mm.
One of the things that we know is, so my thesis is feelings and emotions drive human behavior, and also that positive, long-term, steady drips of positive emotions is what every human being needs in order to thrive, right? So, and we also know that emotions are short-lived. So if you and your husband get into an argument and you start throwing plates at each other, right? Throwing them in the kitchen and they start breaking everywhere. When you run out of plates, you don't get in the car and go to the store, come buy
Buy more plates.
come back and start it up. It's like the argument is over and you move on, right?
Right.
Same thing is true going on a roller coaster ride, and that awe and the joy and excitement, those positive emotions that you're feeling in the moment, you get off and you're like, okay, what's the next ride? It's like that's over now. And so the idea is it has to be steady. It has to be a culture and an environment where you're getting these steady doses of, or steady
Mm-hmm.
drip, if you will, of positive emotions. But
Yes.
here's the most profound thing I've ever learned. We know that all positive emotions boil down to one positive emotion. So when you're feeling awe, when you're feeling excitement, when you're feeling appreciated and joy, all of those and any other positive emotion, they're all the equivalent of love. So you don't have to say, I love you, Terry. You just have to show people by, hey, Terry, I was thinking the other day that the project that I gave you, if you took this class, it would help you tremendously. So I'll schedule you for a class next week. That's love. Terry, I happened to walk by and you're having a conversation with Bill, and I overheard you talk about what you've been working on, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. That's love.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That
And appreciation and gratitude and love, the vibration is so high. You can feel it in the room when the teams are full of appreciation, gratitude, and love.
But the problem is that people hear heart and they diminish it because they think it's soft and weak, and then they hear love and it's like, oh my God. But
Yeah.
I'm at a point now where I used to go, but it's business love. And now I'm like, no, it's just get your head around the idea that human beings, in order to thrive, need love.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get into the romantic aspects of it. It's not what I'm talking about. It's just,
Yeah.
do I feel safe? Do I feel recognized, respected, honored, valued? Am I growing? Am I appreciated? These kinds of emotions, when people have them and they can count on them, that's all the equivalent of love. And when people have an environment where they feel love all the time, this is when people do extraordinary things.
They
So
absolutely do. And a phenomenal example of that is Southwest Airlines.
absolutely.
And I've written about them in every book I have done, and I've written, and I have interviewed those employees, and they always say the same thing: how much they love working for that organization because of the way they are treated.
But it's
So
really interesting because you've got an organization that their logo is a heart,
that's right.
right? Their stock symbol is LUV.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd think, and their stock performance is so much better than everybody else's, but Delta doesn't have that culture. American Airlines, United, they're dragging people
Oh,
off of
they're awful.
planes, right? So you would think that everybody would say, well, that's their model, we should adopt it. But
But
this
they
is a
don't.
hard hurdle for people to get over.
It
This
really is. And I always bring Southwest Airlines up as an example of working with heart. So, Mark, I really want to thank you so much for being here today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I love talking about heart and leadership. It is so much needed. And to my Awaken the Possibilities audience, I truly hope that you learned a little bit about the power of heart in business and how it can help you truly succeed in business and in life. How you treat people is key to not only your success, but their success. And when they're successful in a positive way, you have done so much to help humanity. So I look forward to seeing you next time, and live with heart this week to your success.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. Visit our website at awakenthepossibilities.com to subscribe to listen and rate our podcast on your favorite platform, such as YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Cashbox, and more. For events, business, mindset, and leadership coaching services and courses, visit our website at intuitiveleadership.com. We look forward to sharing more insightful episodes and wish you much success in your business and life.